Hey guys, okay, so advanced pottery. We're gonna talk about slab pots. A few requirements for your slab pots this time around. We're gonna call them your treasure chest pots, but I don't expect you to make an actual physical treasure chest. The goal behind it is that you're gonna build a slab pot out of slabs that encompasses or is about something that you treasure in your life, or the things, multiple, that you treasure in your life. Now that creative factor is kind of up to you on how you're going to illustrate those things. Some of you are going to take a really literal approach and actually put symbols or words on the side of your pot for each thing that you treasure. Some of us might look for a more abstract kind of way to incorporate those things. For example, let's say my dad, okay, which he is, the thing that I treasure the most in my life. I wouldn't be where I am today without him, and we've lost him since, so our relationship is just really important to me, or the relationship that we had. So I'm going to make my pot about him. He was a Broncos fan, so I know, but let's say I'm going to make a Broncos pot. First, obviously you need to get clay, and you're going to have to wedge it. So when you're wedging your clay, remember, grab a piece of clay. Remember, there's two motions. There's a push with the heel of your hand down here, and then rotate with the tips of your fingers. But remember to reset your hands so that you're always kind of squeezing, so you keep a compact piece of clay. So we're gonna wedge our clay 20 to 30 times before you guys are comfortable and confident with no air bubbles. Then you're gonna have to decide what you want your pot to look like. So kind of the base. We always start with the base. When you're rolling out your slabs, make sure you use wooden dowels. Rolling pin, I always put my hands just on top rather than trying to use the handles because I have more leverage over it. It's gonna roll out quicker and I don't rack my knuckles on the table. Roll out my slab. In theory, when my rolling pin hits the wooden dowels, my clay won't be able to be rolled anymore. So I'm there, my clay stopped growing. Set my rolling pin aside. Remember when you're rolling on your desks though, that you need a barrier between your clay and the table. Easy way to get away from that is just to do it on the wedging station instead. In a pinch though, you guys have your plastic bags by your table, or you can grab a fresh one. You can leave or use a piece of burlap, or you can roll out on a wood board. Remember, those can be found in the back part of the room, under the windows, burlap over by the extruder. Just be mindful if you're using the wedging table or a piece of burlap or a board that it's going to constantly soak the water out of your clay. So you don't want to leave it on there for long periods of time. If you do choose to use a board, for moving purposes, if you're building a little bit more fragile, just throw a plastic bag over the board before you store your project on it. Okay, so let's say I do pick something more intricate like a Bronco. I always print out my sheets, and I always do a few different sizes on the very first document. So I just copy and paste it a couple times and resize it, one big, one medium, one small. Those print previews are kind of deceiving, and it saves you the time of having to run back to the printer a bunch. So I'm just gonna go for medium, so I'm gonna pick this guy here. Remember to transfer an image. All you need to do is lay your paper over the top and then grab a pin tool, and you're just gonna do the dots around the outside of your image. So I'm just gonna go around the outside of my image here. I'm going quickly, but you would take your time and make sure that you're right tight up against that line. And then you also don't wanna leave your paper on here forever. So you wanna put it down and then trace as immediately as possible, because the paper will eventually stick. The moisture from your clay will start attaching the two pieces together. Once I have, just set this aside here. Once I have my outline done, you can kind of see it a little bit. It's just a matter of cutting it out. So you're kind of playing dot to dot or connect the dots. I always just keep my image nearby so that if there's some smaller intricate parts and you get lost, can't figure out what you're looking at, you can always look at the picture. I've already cut that out, so here you go. My Bronco matches my Bronco. For the sake of a demonstration, I'm just gonna pick a simpler shape. So let's say I'm gonna do, I don't know, let's say I'm just gonna build a little rectangle pot, and then I'm gonna decorate it as I'm gonna put the Broncos on the side of it or something. After you cut out your base, and the next thing is the walls, you do want those to be the same height, most likely. There are instances where you might creatively decide to have different wall heights, and that's fine, but for those of you that are building a straight up standard pot, you're gonna wanna measure those. Make sure that the height of your walls are gonna be the same all the way around, because if not, trying to cut them even later is a lot more difficult. Remember also, you can see the thickness of the walls on the top of your pot, so you want to make sure that those slabs are even, that you're not kind of pinching in all those connections. You do need to have a lid on this pot. So for your treasure chest, a lid is required. Just a few, we'll get to that later. Let's do sides first. So I'm going to cut my length to the side of my wall, set the extra aside. Now I've already pre-cut a few that are the same height. I used rulers and everything so they're nice and even. I started building with some earlier. To attach, you can attach to the top of your slab, or you can attach to the side. So top or side. I always prefer top, it's a better connection, and I have access to all my joints, whereas on the bottom I'd have to flip it over to make sure those two pieces are sealed together. And then if it dries unevenly, sometimes that base just falls right out. Your walls might be connected, but your base falls out. So on top of is always a better connection, but just keep in mind you're gonna lose some interior space by adding to the top. Slip and score. So I'm gonna score both parts in at least 2 directions, what I'm attaching and where I'm attaching it to. Score, put some slip between. Remember, you only have to put slip on one part really, and then I kind of stick it down, push it in. Furthermore, to make sure that these stay connected, hopefully you guys remember this from Pottery 1, in this corner here, I want to put a little coil of clay. So I just take an extra piece, roll it out, either in your hands or on the table or a combination of both, whatever's easiest for you. Put that coil in the crack. I just peel off the extra here, and then you're going to smooth that into both parts, both the top and the bottom. So I'm kind of strengthening that connection, also hiding any imperfections. So those cracks and crevices, or where I may have extra slip or score marks, and then just smoothing that in to make it look neat. Remember, on any outside connection, you're gonna have to do the same thing. So now where I've connected these, I can see where the base is separate from the wall. It is worth your while to put a little extra clay there. So let's say I put a little bit of clay on that crack, and then I can use my rib in my tool bucket to kind of scrape up that edge and get rid of that connection so you can't see it on the outside. Remember, if you connect to the outside of your slab or your base rather, you do need to flip that upside down and make sure that those are really well connected so they don't fall apart later. And then just smooth it out. So now you can't see. I'm gonna sponge that off so it's neater. Now you can't see the connection, right, where they've been attached. Let's talk about lids. As far as lids are concerned, I always wait to do that last. Get your pot together. That way you know your lid fits your pot, not the other way around. You don't have to try to force your pot to fit your lid that you already made and worked hard on. So I'm gonna move this aside really quick and work with this other little slab pot I started on earlier, since it has a couple walls. To make a lid fit your pot perfectly, super easy way, we're gonna do a watermark. You're gonna take either a sponge or just your wet finger would work too. Oops, that's my slip. Got a little water container here. Get your finger wet and get the walls wet. You wanna do this, remember, after it's all put together. Then you can take your piece of paper and lay it on there, and that water and the little bit of clay that's gonna stick to it will leave a watermark on this piece of paper. And then I'll have an exact size and shape cut out for my lid. I would then place that on a piece of clay, do the dot method around it, cut it out so it's perfect every time. Just be mindful that if you're going to use this method, once you cut it out, you need to flip it upside down so that it fits, because we took a mirrored image essentially of the size you would need. So make your watermark, lay it down, cut it out, flip it back upside down, and then it should fit nice on your pot. The last thing about those is, remember, if you're making a lid to fit on a pot, it does need to have something to prevent it from sliding off once it's fired. So those would be a series of shapes, little balls or little rectangles or squares or something like that. Or it could be a simple coil. Lots of options there. Just make sure that it doesn't slide off. The other thing is, if your lid is small enough and you can lift it off just comfortably using your fingers, that's fine. But I do encourage you, if it starts to get a little larger, to think about a knob that you would then use to lift it on and off with. You could also use finger holes, aka make a nice, smooth, neat hole somewhere within your design on the lid that you would just put your finger inside of to lift your pot off. So instead of a knob, you could leave a hole to put your finger in to lift. So I think that's it for slab pots. Remember, your requirements for this are that it's a treasure chest. So you're making a slab pot that represents something in your life that you treasure. That can be one thing or many things. And then your interpretation of it could be realistic. Like for me, my dad likes the Broncos, so that's a pretty simple, straightforward thing to kind of accomplish. Or it could be something more abstract, like maybe I do a heart shape, or maybe I'm going to just do a straight up box and then decorate it with the things that my dad and I used to do. Like he always taught me how to work on cars and change my own oil and my tires and stuff. He was a great advocate. He was at every sporting event. Maybe those things are illustrated on the outside of my pot with images or writing, things like that. So that's slab pots, advanced pottery. We're going to call them treasure chests. Hopefully that clarified a little bit for you. Don't forget to slip and score your parts. Don't forget to hide the cracks with the coil, and that'll help strengthen it. And then remember, your rib is a really awesome smoothing tool for those techniques to kind of get around the outside, get rid of any of those imperfections, help smooth out the top of your pot, stuff like that. Cool.